We also had the Ospreys landing at the Coast Guard station just this past Monday, doing a medical evacuation and also bringing in medical supplies with a shock trauma platoon was offloaded and then set up at San Francisco General Hospital. So there's so many programs that are going on. But I want to tell you that Mayor Ed Lee has been such a supporter of this program. He recognizes the need for all of these various agencies to collaborate.
In my opinion, our city is special because of this Fleet Week and because of the celebration for the entire country. It is my understanding, and not just bragging rights, we are the best Fleet Week celebration in the entire country.
So I think you'll see over the next, or have seen over the past few days, and will see over the next several days, a lot of sailors and Marines out there that are just having a fantastic time.
We are in, the Pacific is a ring of fire, and San Francisco certainly is no stranger to that. And we all know that we are literally a heartbeat away from a no-notice catastrophe that would affect the citizens up and down this coast. And when that happens, they will look to us to bring relief and to restore order to their lives, and so that's our duty.
You know, San Francisco is really unique in the maturity and development in disaster planning, probably unlike any other city in the country. Really leaning forward in both in the leadership and the partnerships that we're talking about.
What adjustments does your agency need to make in order to make that bridge between your traditional day-to-day operations and when you're suddenly put in contact with, a civilian authority, or in our case, a military authority? Of how do we work together?
For me, thinking about the Fleet Week 2012 exercise that we did, which was, as Lewis described, the boots on the ground, that was an opportunity for one of our city departments, our Department of Public Works, to really appreciate what it was going to look like when we needed to discuss route clearance. And something as simple as not asking for a thing, but asking for a capability. It sounds really simple, but that is a huge concept when it comes to working with the military. I don't ask for a bulldozer. What I ask for is the capability to clear 250 miles of road in 5 days.
We have FEMA liaisons at NORTHCOM. When an event kicks in, I'll send a watch officer who's co-located with the Coast Guard Command in Hawaii over to PACOM Command as a liaison. So we basically will have liaisons from both sides, whether it's DOD liaisons working in our offices, or we have FEMA liaisons that are crossing into those other offices. It really tries to help that seamless approach.
Normally when we launch a military officer into a situation, he's going in to take charge type stuff. But the guidance is instead go in and find out who is in charge and find out how you can make a difference.
And we are meeting on a regular basis, either in that informal phase or the monthly meetings we have, the Harbor Safety Committee, the Area Maritime Security Committee, the Area Committee, the Port Resiliency Committee. We are meeting all the time.
Situational awareness is one of our most important elements of information right when the incident happens. So going back to the communications piece, though, I'll immediately communicate with all my counties, the operational area, Bijan and company, who would let me know exactly what's going on locally and if there are any needs whatsoever. But as Rob said, these relationships are so critical that who you hire, how you hire them, the skill sets they bring to the table are oftentimes we're looking for soft skills as those key personality traits that can really be cool as a cucumber in an emergency.
There's probably no bigger piece we can bring other than streamlined communications to the leaders in the communities and the state than to give them a common operational picture so these senior leaders can make the decisions, they can make the right decisions and the timely decisions to be efficient.
In our discussion today, we want to try to zero in on what we mean when we say resilience and try to address some of the peculiarities of the interconnectedness of both the military and the civilian world in the U.S. In terms of how we manage resilience.
And in San Francisco, we define that in a lot of different ways, but I think primarily the cornerstone of how we've chosen to define resilience is based in seismic safety. And I think that starts going back to 1989. The fact that you're all here as we approach the 25th anniversary of the Loma Prieta earthquake, it really brings to mind the devastation that earthquakes can cause, not just to the physical environment, but to the social fabric of communities. I think seeing the Napa earthquake last month really was an important wake-up call to highlight those issues.
I know that within the military, our focus is the mission, but the one thing that we cannot perform the mission without is people. And within the Navy EM or within the region, that's the thing that I always bring up is the humanity piece of it. And I believe that people are the critical factor when it comes to building resiliency within the military.
The Fleet Week exercise next year would be a perfect opportunity to get all the players together and really talk through what are the components of the execution checklists, and do they need to be deconflicted up front? And then finally, we haven't had a power discussion. This was something that was discussed by the players in our discussion was, we've had a lot of technology that's now been implemented. You've got smart grid technology, you've got hydrogen fuel cell technology. We need to consider having an additional power discussion with consideration of distributed generation, as well as the hydrogen battery technology, smart grid, those other new technologies that we've never discussed before.
And the last thing we brought up was actual FTX and movement of real stuff with real things. That relies on essentially us, the Navy, being able to have the right ship up with the right capabilities to do that, but potentially during one of the fleet weeks to actually execute a movement of goods via LCU or LCAC, coordinated with MARAD, with the Coast Guard and the vessel traffic system, to make sure we understand how we would move it across the bay from somewhere like Benicia to one of the piers here, and actually execute the offload, again, leveraging the crane ships that are part of the plan, and do the whole tooth and tail in a very limited scope, and then see if we can expand that and where the hiccups are so that you can do the full concept of operations that FEMA has to do the support for that. So that's what we work through for our group.
We talked a lot about movement coordination, access coordination. Part of that was the air coordination plan, setting up air bridges. How do you do that? We want some sort of coordinated effort with mission tasking. In California, we've been working very hard on an air coordination plan at the state level. We're kind of relying on CAL FIRE because of their expertise with the large air fleet that they have and the experience they have to help us coordinate that with our Department of Transportation at Caltrans.
When the 7.2 earthquake hit Bohol, very devastating. I'm sure we've seen all the videos and pictures. And then 3 weeks after, Typhoon Yolanda, or Haiyan as many of us know it here, hit the same area. So a lot of first responders here know what it's like to deal with, I'm sure, one natural disaster, but imagine two within a month's period. So this panel is very key, and which I'm sure learning, picking their brain, if you will. What type of humanitarian assistance was requested from the government of the Philippines at the time?
In the aftermath of Typhoon Haiyan, 57 countries responded to the appeal of the Philippine government. 28 of those had military capabilities that were engaged in search and rescue and recovery efforts, and humanitarian assistance such as providing medical services. There were a total of 15,400 military personnel involved in operations. 145 military aircrafts and 29 Navy ships were utilized to provide support to the Philippine Armed Forces and non-government organizations. In fact, the U.S., according to a congressional report, at its peak, 66 U.S. military aircraft and 12 naval vessels were involved, and nearly 1,000 U.S. military personnel were deployed directly to disaster areas. The USS George Washington Naval Task Force, as well as the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit from Okinawa, formed the majority of the Joint Task Force, which was called Operation Damayan.
Being at war for over a decade now has been a challenge for us in order to properly prepare for HADR. And as we discussed in our senior leader seminar workshop, we have constraints. We have constraints because what's our mission? Our mission is to fight the nation's wars and to protect the homeland. So balancing those requirements and the capabilities we bring and making sure that we have the ability to practice and exercise presents a challenge. And if we've been at war for over a decade, it makes it even worse. Fleet Week here in San Francisco is an event that should be emulated at every Fleet Week hosting city in the United States.
But today, the world is seeing the worst humanitarian displacement in history. 51.3 million people are displaced and refugees today. 51 million people who have been forced to flee their homes and their families, not by choice, but to save their lives. And this is, if you were put in perspective, the 26th largest country in the world. And we are the mandate and the responsibility to provide the protection and the care for these people. To discuss why is it so difficult to come up with a new product in the humanitarian world? Why are we able to go to the moon and we still rely in 2014 with a tent? That we rely on ropes, canvas, and poles. So the Romans, so Napoleons, so the last 65 years. Why? Mind-boggling, no? Even in the Philippines response, the tents were used. Question mark. And the answer to this is because the private sector has not seen this as a market. Fundamentally, that's the issue. They have not seen the emergency temporary accommodation as a market enough to justify R&D, to looking at this as a market that is a market, i.e. stable, predictable, non-volatile. This is what UNHCR is dealing with, is the opposite. It's highly volatile. We don't know when the next emergency will happen, and we don't know who the customers are going to be. Nightmare for the private sector. As a result, we had to create alternative partnership to create this R&D, because it didn't come naturally. And this is where the project called the Refugee Housing Unit was born. And therefore, we know that the product that's going to be produced now will fulfill the needs of the refugees.
So one day we're all called into a big assembly room, and who should appear but President Eisenhower. And he said, "We've been practicing a plan. But you have to realize that if anything happens, the plan is worthless." He said, the reason is that reality never conforms to what you think ahead of time. So the plan is perhaps a point of reference, something to depart from. But if you have your mind fixed that you're just going to carry out the plan, it's not going to work. So I thought, you know, that has a lot of resonance here, as we discussed in the various meetings. You want to think these things through, have ideas, have flexibility, but at the same time, the message from President Eisenhower was, you got to look the reality in the face when it happens and adjust yourself to it. Actually, I think it's pretty good advice on many, many things. I've thought about that many times. Incidentally, I got to know President Eisenhower a little bit, and he gave me some advice. When I was appointed Secretary of Labor, I was told I could get an appointment with him if I wanted, so of course I made one right away. And here was this genial man in bed at Walter Reed Hospital. He died about 4 or 5 months later. So we started talking about the Department of Labor. I was astonished at how much he knew about it. Then we started talking about golf and different courses we played. We're having a great time. And all of a sudden a doctor comes in and says, it's time for me to go. All of a sudden, this genial man gets very stern. He waves his finger in my face like this. He says, young man, you're going to come down here and you're going to work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you're going to think you're doing your job. Let me tell you something. If that's what they do, there is no way you can do your job. You just burn yourself out. He said, I can see you like golf as much as I do. If you want to get out of some golf course at least twice a week, get your mind on something else. There's no way you can do your job. The press will get on you. Don't pay any attention to them. They don't have any idea what it takes to do these jobs. So I thought it was pretty good advice. I tried to take it. Didn't succeed all the time, but President Eisenhower was a wonderful man, wonderful leader. Well, there are all kinds of lessons that we all can learn from things that have been related here today and earlier. And as a resident of the Bay Area, I keep saying Bay Area because I want to get people to realize it's not just San Francisco. It's the whole Bay Area we're talking about here because we're all related to each other. We're learning a lot. When, I say when, not if, when the big one comes, it'll come. We're much more ready now than we've ever been before, and that's thanks to General Mike Byatt. So again, thank you, Mike.
So this concludes the formal portion of this year's San Francisco Fleet Week Senior Leader Seminar. It's been our pleasure to host you in this very wonderful facility, and we hope to see you all back again with us next year.